What turns a dream into danger? What happens when a young boy's wish to be an artist becomes the path to war, fear, and loss? This story is not to praise, it is to learn. In simple English, we will walk through the life of Adolf Hitler, from a quiet child with drawings in his hands to a leader whose choices brought pain to millions. We will ask honest questions. We will face difficult truth. And we will take a clear lesson. Power without kindness destroys. Listen closely. Keep your heart open. Let this story help you practice English and choose a better way in your own life. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20th, 1889, in a small town in Austria. As a child, he liked to draw. He loved shapes, faces, buildings, and skies. He dreamed of becoming a great artist one day. His mother was gentle and kind. She believed in his dream. His father was strict. He wanted Adolf to study hard, follow rules, and take a safe government job. Their house often felt tense. Words turned sharp. Silence grew heavy. A boy stood between love and control, between art and order. When Adolf was a teenager, his father died. The house became quiet, but the hole in his heart stayed. School no longer felt important to him. He skipped classes. He walked the streets and watched people. He carried a secret plan. I will go to Vienna. I will be an artist. Vienna was bright and beautiful. He imagined the doors opening. But when he applied to the Academy of Fine Arts, the answer was no. He tried again. The answer was no again. Rejection cut deep. Money became a problem. He lived in small rooms. Some nights he slept on the street. He sold painted postcards to survive. After his mother died, loneliness and anger grew stronger inside him. The boy with pencils and dreams began to change. Part 1. The Boy Who Wanted to Be an Artist. The story of Adolf Hitler began, like many others, with a child who dreamed. He was not born powerful or rich. He was a small boy in a quiet Austrian town, walking through green fields and sketching the world around him. He loved colors, lines, and the way light touched the mountains. When he looked at a building, he didn't just see bricks and walls. He saw beauty, shapes, and meaning. His mother, Clara, would smile when she saw him draw. "You have a gift, Adolf," she would say softly. Her voice was the warmth of home. But his father, Alois, saw things differently. He believed in order, not art. "Art is not a real job," he often said. "You must study hard and work for the government. That is a stable life." Every night, father and son argued. Adolf would stay silent, staring at his pencil, feeling smaller each time. He dreamed of painting city streets and grand cathedrals, but his father only dreamed of discipline. The house was filled with rules and shouting, "Love buried under disappointment." Then, one winter morning, everything changed. His father died suddenly. The man who had ruled the house was gone. For the first time there was quiet. But quiet does not always mean peace. It also means emptiness. Adolf was 13. He thought freedom would make him happy. But freedom without direction is heavy. School no longer interested him. He skipped classes, spent hours walking along the river, drawing clouds, trees, and people passing by. His teacher said, "He is smart, but lazy." They didn't see the sadness in his eyes. He kept a secret plan, one that burned quietly inside. "I will go to Vienna. I will be an artist." When he finally finished school, he packed his bags and took a train to Vienna, the capital of Austria. It was the city of music, art, and dreams. The streets were alive with voices, carriages, and colors. "This is it," he whispered to himself. "This is where my future begins." He walked to the great Academy of Fine Arts with hope shining in his heart. He imagined the judges looking at his drawings and saying, "You are talented. Welcome." But when the letter came, the words were cold. Rejected. He stood frozen. His heart pounded. He tried to smile and said to himself, "Next year, I will try again." He worked hard, drew every day, and tried again. But the next letter said the same thing. Rejected. That second no broke something inside him. He wandered the city in the cold. He had no job, no money, no plan. Sometimes he sold small paintings and postcards to tourists. Sometimes he went hungry. Sometimes he slept on benches or in shelters. Vienna, the city of beauty, became a place of struggle. In those years, his mother became sick. She was his last light, his only comfort. He took care of her, sitting beside her bed, drawing in silence. When she died, he lost not only his mother, but also the person who believed in his dreams. He felt abandoned by the world. Loneliness can be dangerous when it turns into anger. Adolf began to look for someone to blame. The schools that rejected him, the people who ignored him, the city that didn't care. He said to himself, "It's not my fault. They made me fail." It was the first time bitterness entered his heart. He still painted, but now his art carried shadows. The boy who once saw light in the mountains now saw darkness in the faces around him. He started reading books about power, nations, and destiny. His notebooks were no longer filled with drawings. They were filled with ideas about who was strong and who was weak. Life in Vienna taught him how harsh the world could be. But instead of growing wiser or kinder, he grew colder. The dream of art was replaced by the dream of control. He still believed he was meant for something great, but the meaning of greatness had changed. He was no longer the boy who wanted to paint beautiful buildings. He was becoming the man who wanted to build a new world in his own image, under his own rules. That shift, quiet but deep, would change not only his life, but the lives of millions to come. In every child's dream, there is power, the power to create or the power to destroy. Adolf's dream once held colors and hope, but pain twisted it, and from that twist a darker story began to grow. Part 2, The soldier who found a cause. By 1914, the world was changing fast. Machines, factories, and nations were racing for power. Adolf was still in Vienna, struggling to survive. He was 25, living in small, dusty rooms, painting postcards to buy food. His hands were thin. His dreams were smaller now. But deep inside, he still believed his life was meant for something more. Then came the news. World War I had begun. Countries were calling young men to fight. Flags waved. Crowds cheered. The air was full of noise and pride. For Adolf, it felt like a new door had opened. This is my chance, he told himself. I will fight for Germany. I will belong somewhere again. He joined the German army, not as an Austrian, but as a man searching for purpose. For the first time, he wore a uniform that made him feel important. The army gave him food, shelter, and most of all, a reason to exist. In his letters he wrote, "Finally, I am part of something bigger than myself." In the muddy trenches of France, life was hard. Rain soaked everything. The ground shook with explosions. The sky turned black with smoke. Soldiers slept beside rats and woke to the sound of guns. Many lost friends every day. But Adolf did not complain. He worked as a messenger, running across dangerous battlefields to deliver notes between commanders. It was one of the riskiest jobs. Still, he volunteered again and again. He wanted to prove his loyalty, his courage, his worth. His fellow soldiers said he was strange, quiet, serious, and distant. He didn't joke much. He didn't drink or laugh like the others. He sat alone, reading, thinking, and dreaming of victory. When others rested, he painted small sketches of destroyed villages and soldiers' faces. For his bravery, Adolf received 2 medals. One of them was the Iron Cross, a symbol of courage in battle. For the first time, he felt respected. The boy who once felt invisible now felt seen. He believed the army was his family, his destiny. But destiny can turn quickly. In 1918, after years of fighting, Germany lost the war. The day the news arrived, Adolf was in shock. His hands trembled. "No," he whispered. "This cannot be true." He had given everything. He had risked his life, followed orders, believed in the dream of victory, and now that dream was gone. Germany's leaders signed a peace agreement called the Treaty of Versailles. It forced Germany to give up land, pay huge amounts of money, and accept blame for the war. The country was broken. Factories stopped. Families starved. Pride disappeared. Adolf, like many soldiers, returned home to chaos. He walked through streets filled with beggars, broken buildings, and angry faces. People shouted that their leaders had betrayed them. Soldiers were no longer heroes. They were reminders of defeat. He felt lost again, but this time his pain had a shape. He began to say, Germany did not lose the war on the battlefield. It was betrayed by weak leaders and those who worked against us. That belief became a seed a dangerous one. He spent hours listening to speeches in beer halls, where small political groups gathered to talk about Germany's future. Some shouted about revenge, others promised hope. One day, he heard a speaker from the German Workers' Party. The man's words were full of anger and pride. Adolf leaned forward, his eyes bright. He felt something awaken inside him, the same fire he once felt for art, but darker, sharper. After the meeting, he joined the party. At first, he was just a listener, but when he spoke, people turned to listen. His voice was strong. His words had rhythm. He spoke about Germany's pain, about lost honor, about a dream of power and unity. "Germany will rise again," he shouted. The crowd roared. For the first time since his rejection from art school, Adolf felt admired. He had found a new canvas, not made of paint, but of people's hearts and fears. He no longer held a paintbrush, he held words. And words, when filled with anger, can become weapons. He began to believe that he was chosen for something great, not to paint pictures, but to rebuild a nation. The boy who once wanted to create beauty now wanted to shape power. The soldier who once fought for his country now wanted to control it. The war had changed him completely. Where once there was hope, now there was bitterness. Where once there was art, now there was ideology. And in that moment, Adolf Hitler, the dreamer turned soldier, became a man searching not for love or peace, but for revenge. He had found his cause, and the world would soon pay the price. Part 3: The Speaker Who Moved a Nation. After the war, Germany was a wounded country. The streets of Munich were filled with hungry children and tired workers. The air smelled of smoke and worry. People waited in long lines for bread. Their money was worth almost nothing. Families burned paper money just to keep warm. It was in this chaos that Adolf Hitler found his voice. He was now a member of the German Workers' Party, a small political group with big dreams but few members. Most people ignored them until Adolf began to speak. At first he was nervous, but once he started, the room fell silent. His voice rose and fell like a wave. His eyes burned with passion. He shouted about Germany's pain, about lost pride, about a great future that could return. When he finished, people clapped, shouted, and even cried. "Who is that man?" they asked. "He speaks what we all feel." Adolf realized something powerful that day. Words can move people more than bullets. He practiced his speeches again and again, how to use his hands, how to pause, how to look into the crowd. He learned to fill his sentences with emotion, anger, and hope. He told people what they wanted to hear. You are not to blame. You are strong. You were betrayed. Together we will rise again. People listened. People believed. Soon he became the star of the party. He changed its name to something new, something bold, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or the Nazi Party for short. He designed a red flag with a black swastika at its center. "This symbol," he said, "will be known across the world." Every week the halls grew fuller. Farmers, workers, and soldiers came to hear him speak. They came with fear in their hearts and left with fire in their eyes. But inside that fire, there was danger. Adolf's speeches were not just about hope. They were also about hate. He began to blame certain groups, especially Jewish people, for Germany's problems. He said they had too much power, too much money, too much control. These ideas were wrong and cruel, but they gave people someone to blame. When people are hurt and afraid, they sometimes believe the loudest voice, not the wisest one. Adolf knew how to use that fear. He turned it into energy, into movement, into loyalty. He said Germany is not weak. Germany has just forgotten who it is. Crowds shouted his name. Men raised their arms and cried, "Heil Hitler!" By 1923, his dream of power grew even stronger. He wanted to take control of the government. He gathered his followers and marched through Munich in what became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. He believed people would join him. He believed soldiers would salute him. But he was wrong. The police stopped the march. Shots were fired. Several men died. Adolf was arrested. He sat in a cold jail cell, angry but not defeated. "They can imprison my body," he told a friend, "but not my ideas." During his 9 months in prison, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, My Struggle. In it, he told his story and his plans. He spoke of power, race, and revenge. He dreamed of rebuilding Germany into a great empire. The words were dangerous, but they reached many readers. The book became popular. When he was released, Adolf returned to politics stronger than before. He had learned something important. Power must be taken not by force, but by influence. He changed his approach. Instead of fighting with guns, he used speeches, symbols, and promises. He built the Nazi Party into a national movement. He created groups for young boys, the Hitler Youth, to teach them loyalty. He organized rallies with thousands of flags and drums. He made people feel proud again, but that pride was built on division. In 1933, his strategy worked. Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany, the country's highest leader. Crowds filled the streets, waving flags, singing songs, and shouting his name. Hay believed he would save them. They didn't know the price they would pay. The painter had become a soldier. The soldier had become a speaker. And now, the speaker had become a ruler. He promised peace, strength, and jobs. He spoke of unity and destiny, but behind his promises were darker plans. Plans that would soon turn Germany and the world into a nightmare. Part 4: The Dictator Who Wanted Control. When Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933, the nation celebrated. After years of poverty and shame, many Germans finally felt proud again. Factories reopened, roads were built, and people found jobs. "Hitler has saved us," they said. Posters of his face appeared in every town. Newspapers called him a hero. Children learned songs that praised his name. But while people cheered, something darker began to grow behind the smiles. Hitler didn't just want to lead Germany. He wanted to control it. He started by changing the laws. Opponents were silenced. Other political parties were banned. Newspapers could only publish what the government approved. On the radio, every speech repeated one message: believe in the Führer, believe in Hitler. People who disagreed disappeared. Some were arrested in the night. Some were never seen again. Fear became part of daily life. At first, people ignored it. "It's for safety," they said. "He knows what's best." Slowly, freedom faded. Hitler wanted not just obedience, but worship. His image hung in classrooms. Teachers told students, "The Führer is like a father to us all." In every school, children joined groups like the Hitler Youth, where they learned discipline, songs, and loyalty. They marched in rows, waving flags with the black swastika. They shouted, "Heil Hitler!" with bright eyes, believing it was good to do so. Meanwhile, Hitler's secret police, called the Gestapo, listened everywhere. Neighbors spied on neighbors. Even children were taught to report their parents if they said bad things about the government. The feeling of trust disappeared. People smiled in public but whispered in private. Hitler also rebuilt the army, which had been limited after the last war. He trained thousands of soldiers and made new weapons. The world watched with worry, but he promised peace. "Germany only wants respect," he said. Yet inside his mind, plans were forming. Plans to expand, to conquer, to rule. He believed Germany was destined to control all of Europe. He told his generals, "We need more land, more power, more purity." To him, purity meant something cruel. He wanted a world where only certain kinds of people could belong. He called this the Aryan race, people with specific features and bloodlines. Everyone else, especially Jewish people, was seen as an enemy. This idea was not just wrong, it was dangerous. But many people believed it because they were afraid, or they wanted someone to blame. Soon, Jewish families lost their rights. Their shops were closed. Their books were burned. Children were taught lies about them in school. The police looked away when their homes were attacked. In one terrible night in 1938, windows of Jewish stores and homes were smashed all across Germany. Fires burned. That night became known as Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. People who once called themselves neighbors became enemies. Fear had turned to hate. But still, many Germans supported Hitler. They saw new jobs, new cars, new buildings. They thought life was improving. Few dared to question how that improvement came. By 1939, Hitler was ready for his next step. He told his generals, "We will take Poland." On September 1st, 1939, German tanks rolled across the border. Bombs fell. Cities burned. The invasion of Poland started World War II. The world was shocked. England and France declared war on Germany. The fighting spread quickly, from Europe to Africa, from the skies to the seas. At first, Hitler's army won battle after battle. His soldiers were disciplined, his strategies fast and ruthless. He seemed unstoppable. "Germany will rule the world," his followers said. Crowds cheered as the swastika flag rose above new cities. Hitler smiled on balconies, waving to the people below. But behind that smile, millions were suffering. Families were being torn apart, countries were being destroyed, and deep inside his government, a plan was growing, a plan not just to conquer land, but to erase entire groups of people. The dream that began with art had turned into a nightmare of control. The young boy who once drew pictures of buildings was now destroying them. The man who said he would save Germany was slowly destroying its soul. And yet, the crowds kept cheering. They did not see the darkness spreading behind the banners and the songs. The dictator had achieved complete power, but the more power he took, the more humanity he lost. Part 5. The War That Changed the World. By 1940, Adolf Hitler stood at the height of his power. His armies marched through Europe like a storm. One country after another fell: Poland, Norway, Denmark, France. Flags with black swastikas flew over cities that once had their own. Crowds saluted him as the savior of Germany. Newspapers called him a genius. But behind the victory parades, something dark was spreading, a shadow deeper than war itself. Hitler believed he could build a perfect empire, a new world where only certain people could live freely. His government began rounding up Jewish families, Roma people, and anyone he considered different. They were taken away from their homes, told they were going somewhere safe, but the truth was far worse. These people were sent to concentration camps, places surrounded by barbed wire and guards with guns. At first, they were forced to work. Later, many were killed. The horror that followed became known as the Holocaust, one of the darkest events in human history. Millions of innocent men, women, and children were murdered simply because of who they were. Their names, their songs, their stories vanished in smoke. While this was happening, the war raged on. Hitler's army moved fast, using tanks, planes, and surprise attacks. This new style of fighting was called Blitzkrieg, lightning war. It shocked the world. In a few short months, he controlled most of Europe. But power has limits. When greed pushes too far, it begins to collapse. In 1941, Hitler made a huge mistake. He decided to invade the Soviet Union. He believed his army could win quickly, but the Soviet land was vast, the winter cruel, and the soldiers unbreakable. German troops froze in the snow. Food ran out. Thousands died without even seeing an enemy. At the same time, across the ocean, a new power entered the war, the United States. After Japan attacked the American base at Pearl Harbor, the U.S. joined the fight against Germany and its allies. Now, Hitler faced enemies on all sides: the Soviet Union in the east, Britain and America in the west. The dream of world domination began to crumble. German cities started to burn under constant bombing. The sky was no longer filled with eagles. It was filled with flames. Ordinary people hid in basements as sirens wailed. Children cried. Families lost everything. The same citizens who once cheered now whispered, "Was this really what we wanted?" But Hitler refused to stop. He gave long speeches on the radio shouting that victory was near. He blamed his generals, his soldiers, anyone but himself. He no longer saw truth, only the world inside his mind. By 1943, the turning point came. The German army lost a massive battle at Stalingrad. It was the first clear sign that the war was slipping away. From that moment, the defeat of Nazi Germany became only a matter of time. Still, Hitler ordered his soldiers to fight to the end. No retreat, he commanded, but his empire was collapsing from within. His allies began to surrender. His own generals started doubting him. The war that began with promises of greatness now brought only death and ruin. Cities that once glowed with lights were now piles of ashes. Millions of soldiers and civilians had died. The same people who had followed him now feared him. In 1944, as Allied forces landed in Normandy, France, and pushed toward Germany, Hitler grew more paranoid. He trusted no one, not even his closest friends. He hid deep underground, in a bunker beneath Berlin. Outside, the world he built was falling apart. Inside, he pretended it was still under control. He moved pins on maps, sent impossible orders, and spoke of final victory. But the truth was clear. Germany was losing, and his dream was dying. And yet, he could not let go. He once painted pictures of cathedrals. Now he ordered cities to burn. He once dreamed of greatness. Now he hid from the truth. The war that was supposed to make Germany strong had destroyed it instead. By the end of 1944, even his followers began to realize that the man they called Führer had led them into disaster. The boy who wanted to be an artist had painted the world in fire. And the masterpiece he imagined had turned into a tragedy the world would never forget. Part 6: The Fall of a Dream. By early 1945, Adolf Hitler's empire was collapsing. The once mighty German army was retreating from every direction. From the east came the Soviet Union, fierce and unstoppable. From the west came the United States and Britain, pushing closer each day. Bombs fell endlessly over Berlin. The streets where children once played were now silent and broken. Inside the city, people lived in fear and hunger. Families hid in basements, listening to the rumble of tanks above. Smoke filled the air. Hope was gone. The man who had promised a 1,000-year Reich had brought only 12 years of destruction. And deep beneath the ruins, in a dark bunker under the capital, Adolf Hitler sat surrounded by maps that no longer meant anything. The man who once spoke to millions now spoke to only a few. His face was pale, his hands shook, his eyes darted around the room. Reports of defeat arrived every hour. Cities were gone. Generals disobeyed him. Allies had abandoned him. But still he shouted, "We will not surrender!" He refused to see reality. He blamed everyone else, the generals, the German people, even fate itself. He said, "If Germany loses, it is because the people were not strong enough." His voice was cold, almost empty. Beside him was a woman named Eva Braun, his longtime companion. She had stayed with him through everything, the parades, the speeches, the hiding. Even as the bombs shook the ground above them, she smiled and said, "I will not leave you." Her loyalty was blind, but it was all he had left. Outside the bunker, the Soviet army surrounded Berlin. The sound of gunfire was constant. Buildings burned. Soldiers and civilians alike were dying in the streets. The once proud city was now a sea of rubble. On April 29, 1945, with the end only hours away, Hitler did something unexpected. He married Eva Braun. The ceremony was small, just a few people, a few whispered words, and a handshake. No music, no flowers, no future. It was a strange moment of peace in a world of chaos. That night, they sat together and talked quietly. They spoke of their lives, of memories that now felt far away. The art school he never entered, the speeches, the crowds. Perhaps, for a brief moment, he remembered the boy with the sketchbook who had wanted to paint. But that boy was long gone. The next morning, April 30th, 1945, Hitler made his final decision. He called his few remaining followers and said, "I will not be captured alive." He believed dying was better than surrender. To him, life without control was not worth living. Moments later, he and Eva retreated to a small room. The door closed. A gunshot echoed through the bunker. The man who had once shaken the world was gone. He was 56 years old. When Soviet soldiers reached the bunker days later, they found only ashes and silence. Above ground, the city had fallen. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. The war in Europe was over. But the cost was unimaginable. More than 60 million people had died across the world. Entire cities were destroyed. Families were lost forever. And in the camps he had built, millions of innocent people, Jews, Roma, prisoners, and others, had been murdered. The dream of one man had become the nightmare of humanity. When the war ended, the world looked at the ruins and made a promise. Never again. Nations came together to build peace. Germany was divided and rebuilt slowly, carefully. People learned the truth of what had happened. The stories of those who suffered were told so the world would not forget. In time, Adolf Hitler's name became a warning, a symbol of what happens when hate replaces empathy, when ambition replaces compassion. His story became not one of greatness, but of tragedy. And so the boy who once dreamed of art left behind only ashes. From his fall, the world learned that real strength is not in control or power, but in kindness and respect for others. The world learned that one voice of hate can destroy millions, but one act of love can begin to heal them. His dream fell, but the lessons remain. Epilogue and moral lesson. History is a mirror. When we look into it, we do not look to admire, we look to understand. Adolf Hitler's life shows how a dream can twist into danger when pain becomes blame, when pride becomes hate, and when power has no heart. He began as a boy with drawings. He ended as a man who brought war, fear, and death. From this we learn clear lessons. First, choices matter. Small choices become habits. Habits become character. Character shapes history. When we choose honesty, respect, and courage, we build a safer world. When we choose lies, cruelty, and fear, we break it. Second, words are powerful. A speech can lift people up or turn them against each other. Learn to test words. Ask, is it true? Is it fair? Does it help or does it harm? If a voice tells you to hate a group, walk away. Third, freedom needs guardians. When newspapers are quiet, when schools teach only one view, when neighbors fear each other, freedom is in danger. Protect the rights of every person, especially the weak and the different. Fourth, empathy is strength. The Holocaust was possible because many people stopped seeing others as human. Never let this happen again. See the person before the label. Listen. Care. Stand up early, not late. Finally, remember, real leadership serves. It does not demand worship. It does not blame the weak. It builds. It heals. It accepts limits. And it takes responsibility. Let this story teach your mind and guide your heart. Learn English, yes, but also learn wisdom. Choose kindness over cruelty. Choose truth over lies. Choose courage over silence. In this way, we honor the victims and protect the future. If this story helped you learn and think, please support Lingua Tales. Like the video to help more learners find it. Comment one lesson you will remember from today's story. Save this video to watch again and practice your English. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss our next simple history and motivation stories. Listen again with subtitles to train your ear. Check our playlist for more A2B1 stories with clear words and a strong message. Thank you for learning with us. Learn English. Learn wisdom. Choose kindness. See you in the next episode.